And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our NBA segment, Throwing It Up.
Hello and welcome to another edition of SportsZone. We are kicking it off with the important stuff as we always do. I've got the usual suspects, Jessica and Aaron, by my side, so you know what time it is. It's Studio 90 and a big weekend this past, extended week in world soccer, and we will start with probably the biggest story. We touched on some Champions League matchups that were happening this past week, and probably the biggest, most notable matchup was that between Tottenham and Real Madrid. We touched on Real Madrid's struggles going into this game a little bit, and it continued as Tottenham pretty convincingly was able to defeat Madrid 3-1 to take control of that group and sort of continue Real Madrid's sort of free-falling form. Now, Madrid was able to get a victory over the weekend. But Jessica, we talked a little bit last week about Real Madrid's struggles. What really is contributing to them performing so poorly this season?
I definitely think it's, Gareth Bale not being there, Carvajal not being there. They're missing a couple key players, and I think that that's what's really hurting them. And in the game against Tottenham, they were getting really outplayed. And so I think that going forward, that definitely shook their confidence, but they still have a lot of time to improve in their last two group stage matches. They got that victory this weekend, so hopefully they can pull together. And I think that they'll still find themselves in the round of 16 easily.
Yeah, especially with Dortmund laying an egg against APOEL, again drawing, sort of creating a big gap between the top two and the rest of the group there. Certainly helps Madrid out, but Tottenham's success is sort of a bit unprecedented, and we'll use them as a springboard to talk about some other English teams. It was a big league weekend in the Premier League, several top five teams clashing. I think we'll start with Manchester United against Chelsea. It's been sort of a contentious rivalry the past couple weeks. This was Jose Mourinho against Chelsea once again. Aaron, going into this match, Manchester United sitting second in the table, but again in a big match, Jose Mourinho tactically setting his team up like they're a mid-table team. Why do you think he continues to use this sort of strategy?
Well, that's always sort of been Mourinho's strategy, especially in the Premier League, to sort of win versus those mid-table and lower-level teams, then versus the big teams, sort of park the bus, go for a draw. But I don't think it's going to work anymore just because you see that lineup that they put out. It's very defensive. It's five at the back. You got guys like Antonio Valencia and Ashley Young who can do a job but aren't really that dangerous going forward. So, I mean, it was a weird lineup to put out in such a big game, and I think it showed because as soon as Morata scored that great goal for Chelsea, it sort of threw everything out of whack for United because they were down 1-0 and they had to throw on some attacking players and change the formation. But it was weird to see them start a game five at the back when you're ahead of a team in the table. So definitely for United, it was a weird lineup to put out from Mourinho and not a good performance, but definitely a good performance for Chelsea. Morata played well, the midfield played well, so look for Chelsea to kick on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and United's 1-0 loss means Manchester City, who was victorious over Arsenal on the weekend, now is 8 points clear, top of the table. Jessica, we've talked about Manchester City several times on this segment, and they just seem to keep on performing. They're now, I think, undefeated in the league since last April. They are still undefeated in all competitions this year. Is Manchester City, are they for real this season?
I definitely think so, especially looking at their next 5 games. They really don't have any big competition, and so I think that them keeping this winning streak is definitely going to be possible.
Yeah, Kevin De Bruyne is in the type of form that made him a $80 million signing from Wolfsburg a couple seasons ago. He is just bossing the midfield. David Silva playing very well. Leroy Sané proving that he's one of the brightest young players in all of world football. And Raheem Sterling is sort of, he's teetering in form a little bit, but I think the players and the quality of players around him are bringing him up a little bit. And also worth noting that Sergio Aguero in the Champions League this week, his goal against Napoli made him the all-time leading scorer for Manchester City. So that team's just goals all around, and they are far and away at the top of the Premier League. So we'll switch from England to come back stateside to preview or an update sort of the MLS Cup situation. We had conference semifinal matchups a week ago. Seattle and Houston have emerged in the Western Conference, and Toronto and Columbus have emerged in the Eastern Conference. So we'll start in the Western Conference. Jessica, Seattle is the reigning MLS Cup champions. They were able to dispatch Vancouver in the Western Conference semifinals. Clint Dempsey was able to get a couple goals, build some momentum there. Do you think of the 4 remaining teams, is Seattle one of the strongest teams left?
Definitely. I think that especially in that game, it really showed they came together. Clint Dempsey got the job done. He scored 2 goals. And so I can definitely see them playing a great game against Houston Dynamo, who also was victorious against the Timbers, and they played a great game as well.
And on the Eastern Conference side, Toronto FC appears to still be the team to beat. But as we sort of talked about before this segment, as a result of their 2-leg victory over the Red Bulls, they will be without Sebastian Giovinco and Josie Altidore, at least for their first leg matchup against Columbus. Aaron, do you see that impacting that tie in a way that shifts enough to Columbus where they can really realistically have a chance?
I definitely see it impacting the tie, especially being without Sebastian Giovinco. He's the guy that sort of creates everything for Toronto FC. And you look at the Columbus Crew, there's this whole controversy with them maybe being moved to Austin, Texas, and I think that's sort of given them an extra fire, an extra boost, and they're definitely the Cinderella story of this MLS Cup. They're coming in hot, so I could definitely see them beating Toronto FC in this first leg and then maybe looking to kick on and make it to the MLS Cup final.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on MLS Cup in the coming weeks, especially with all domestic soccer in Europe going on international break. But I think that is all that we have for this edition of Studio 90. But stick around for more hard-hitting analysis on SportsZone after this.
Welcome back to SportsZone. This is your favorite MLB segment, Getting to Third Base. I'm Aviva. I'm with David and Kristen, like always. The World Series has ended. Houston Astros beat the Los Angeles Dodgers in 7 games. Very exciting. Last week we talked about the first 5 games, really the 5th game, which was very exciting. So today we're just going to just give our last thoughts. So, Kristen, to start, what do you think of the World Series?
So I think both teams definitely gave everyone a really exciting series to watch. Just one key point that I wanted to hit on, Yu Darvish really struggled for the Dodgers throughout this series. He pitched in Games 3 and Game 7, and in both of those games, he wasn't able to make it past the 2nd inning, gave up a lot of runs early on. He was very shaky. So I think that was a really key factor in why the Dodgers struggled so much and why they ultimately lost Game 7. He was put under a lot of pressure starting Game 7. He's probably not the Dodgers' best pitcher, but he was put in that position. He had to do well, and unfortunately for the Dodgers, he really struggled in Game 7.
And David, what are your thoughts?
So as I said last week, Justin Verlander really was the difference for the Astros. I don't see them making the World Series or even let alone winning it without him. In his 2 games pitched, he stopped the Dodgers from getting more than 3 runs, which, considering the high scoring stakes that were going on throughout the series, that's pretty impressive. Especially in Game 6, he didn't really get up a hit. He gave up a walk, hit by pitch, and then a sac fly to tie it. And I just want to give a thumbs up to Carlos Correa, my man, 23 years old, proposing to Miss Texas 2016. Made me cry, man.
And my final thoughts is that coming into the World Series, the Houston offense was supposed to be really good, and we definitely saw that. George Springer, who was the MVP, he set the World Series. He's the first player in World Series history to hit 4 home runs in 4 straight games. He also set the record for the most bases, which 29, and then also extra bases, I think, with 8. So now we're going to move into the off season. We saw some manager switcheroos. So to start off in New York, Kristen.
Okay, yeah, so I want to start off by talking about my hometown team, the New York Mets. We finally got rid of Terry Collins. I think a lot of fans were fed up with him and were ready to see him go after a few years of not making the playoffs and losing the wild card game in 2016. So they brought in Mickey Callaway, who was the former pitching coach for the Cleveland Indians, and he comes very highly rated by people that he's worked with in the past. The players on the Indians have all, sung his praises and said that he really relates well to the players and really listens. So I think that was a really great move on the part of the Mets to bring him in and kind of push Terry Collins out. Collins, we saw throughout his time with the Mets. He did have that one great World Series run season with them in 2015. But after that, we saw him make a lot of questionable moves in managing the bullpen and things like that. And a lot of people were just fed up with the decisions that he was making. So I think it's going to be a great fresh start for the Mets. And I think Callaway really brings a good energy. And from what other players have said about him, I think it's a really great choice for them. Transitioning to the Yankees, they let go of manager Joe Girardi. They haven't named a new manager yet, but Girardi has been with the team for a significant amount of time, and he has been really good for them in the years that he's been with them. This season in particular, the Yankees were not supposed to make it even past the wild card game. I don't think anyone thought that they would come within one game of winning the World Series, which they did, which was incredible to watch. So I think a lot of people were really shocked that the Yankees let Girardi go. They want to take a look at some different options and move in a different direction. I don't necessarily think that was the best move on their part. I think coming off of a season like they had, sticking with their manager could have really been beneficial for them, but we're going to have to see if they can get someone to replace him that can take them as far, but I really don't think that's going to happen.
And David, we saw in Boston and in Philadelphia, 2 managers got fired, so what about them?
So I'll tackle Philadelphia first thing in the East. So Philadelphia, Pete Mackanin wasn't really thought of to be the manager of the future, it seemed. I heard the term caretaker thrown out there to basically handle the Phillies losing a lot of games. He got moved to the front office, which was slightly surprising considering that they just extended him. Now they have Gabe Kaplar, a former player himself, who is now coming in from the Dodgers front office. He came with some great reviews from Andrew Friedman and other Dodgers executives. However, some of the Dodgers coaches who remain anonymous did not sing praises for him. So it's definitely be interesting to see how he handles his first managerial stint. He's never managed at any level before. And then on the other side of the spectrum in Boston, John Farrell gone after a few seasons, very tumultuous. Some could say that cancer really saved his career because of that month. They couldn't really evaluate him, and he had to stay on for another 2 seasons or so. Now they're replacing him with a highly analytical guy from the Astros, Alex Correa, the current bench coach, or former bench coach, I guess now. So they're going to look to him to, bring a new style into the clubhouse, not as many distractions. And I think personally it's going to be a great hire, and they'll really benefit from it.
Yeah, and then lastly, here in Washington, Dusty Baker got fired, and Dave Martinez, who's the former Chicago Cubs bench coach, is coming in. So it's going to be interesting to see how far the Nats can go with a new manager. And that's all the time we have, and this has been Getting to Third Base.
Hello and welcome back to SportsZone. This is our NFL segment, Going for Two. I'm joined by David and Daniel. We got a 3-person panel to talk about a lot of big action that happened over the last 7 days in the NFL, and we'll start with action that or things that took place not on the field. The trade deadline was this past week. A lot of more noise than we usually have with the trade deadline. Jimmy Garoppolo moving to San Francisco, Kelvin Benjamin moving from Carolina to Buffalo. I'll throw it over you to Daniel. For you, what was the biggest deadline day move, and which team improved the most with their trade deadline?
So I think in the short term, the Eagles improved the most. Jay Ajayi is a great running back. We saw it with the Dolphins last year. He had a great season. Obviously this year he got off to a slow start, and the Eagles were able to trade a relatively unimportant draft pick. It's going to be a late 4th round pick. I think the Dolphins could have gotten a much better pick. I would say Garoppolo in the long term though, because I think Garoppolo could really be a franchise quarterback, but I don't think he's going to make a big impact this year, as it might take him a while to learn the playbook.
And in terms of also transactions taking place off the field, another big news that broke this past week was a rookie sensation for the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson tore his ACL and will be out for the remainder of the season. So David, in not just in terms of Houston, but in terms of a bigger picture in the AFC East, what does Deshaun Watson's injury mean?
I mean, if you watch Deshaun Watson for the past several games, he's looked really good, throwing for a lot of touchdowns and really minimizing his mistakes. Especially against Seattle, he learned not to throw in the direction of Richard Sherman pretty early on, which was impressive to see a rookie adapt that fast. This basically gifts the division to the Jaguars and Titans. I think with Watson, they would have been able to contend for that. However, watching Tom Savage playing uninspiring football for his start week 1 and start this week, I mean, it's hard to really say that the Texans will be able to contend for the AFC South.
Yeah, the Texans managing only 1 offensive touchdown in their loss against Tennessee there, and Jacksonville also picking up a victory. So both the Titans and the Jaguars sitting at 5-3 in that division, and now Houston sitting at 3-5. It seems a lot bigger of a gap to surmount when you have Tom Savage leading the line as opposed to Deshaun Watson. But in the NFC this past weekend, I think the Philadelphia Eagles putting up big numbers against the Denver Broncos. As Daniel was talking about, new addition Jay Ajayi was on show, Carson Wentz there as well. Daniel, we talked about this on the segment last week, but the Eagles have sort of separated themselves from the rest of the pack in the NFL, and do you think they are the best team in the league?
Yes, I do. I see a team with a great defense and offense. You have a guy in Carson Wentz who's an MVP candidate. The guy's been special this year. And the defense has been playing very well this year with Jim Schwartz as their defensive coordinator. I could definitely see them winning the Super Bowl this year.
And the NFC has really sort of been thrown in flux by the injury to Aaron Rodgers. It seems like a lot of teams now jockeying for position there. And one of the teams sort of flying under the radar, maybe because they're a West Coast team and there's sort of an East Coast media bias, but that's the Los Angeles Rams. They were victorious, dropping 51 points against the New York Giants. David, with Jared Goff proving to be not the bust that everyone thought he was, Todd Gurley returning to his rookie year form, is Los Angeles for real this year?
I honestly believe that they're going to take away the crown for the NFC West this year. Seattle has been middling. Maybe they're going to improve with Dwayne Brown going to their offensive line. But the Cardinals lost their starting QB and running back. Seattle struggled to get off the ground and choked to the Redskins this weekend. And finally, the 49ers are just not good at all, and they're not going to improve in the season.
Yeah, the Rams seem to really stand to benefit from that division, and they've been putting together lots of big performances. They beat the Cowboys. Their win against the Giants maybe not really worth noting, but they've beaten the Raiders as well. So they've beaten some quality teams, and Jared Goff, this 4-touchdown performance, nice and efficient, 14 for 22. He was, very efficient with the ball. He's not going to put up big, flashy numbers, but he seems to be good enough, and the acquisition of Sammy Watkins really makes them dynamic. We'll shift to another team in the NFC that's sort of flying under the radar, but sitting at 6-2 and leading their division, and that's the New Orleans Saints. This division, at the beginning of the season, was Atlanta's to lose as the reigning NFC champions. But Daniel, I'll throw it over to you. I mean, New Orleans is really prospering this year. Maybe they've had an easy schedule, but with a quarterback like Drew Brees and the Falcons struggling this year, do you think the Saints are a team to be reckoned with in the whole NFC picture?
I really do. I think their defense is much improved, and that has been one of their main issues in the past couple of years, which has really been holding Drew Brees back from making the playoffs. But this year, their defense has been shutting down opponents like we haven't seen in years. And with Drew Brees at quarterback and potentially home field advantage and a potential bye, I think they could really make noise in the playoffs, as they have a great home crowd and historically have done very well in their stadium.
Yeah, the NFC, we're seeing some interesting teams succeeding there in terms of the Rams and the Saints. In the AFC this past week, we didn't really get to see their best on display because the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers both were on bye this week. The Kansas City Chiefs, though, were in action in Dallas for America's Game of the Week, and they were unable to get the job done against the Dallas Cowboys. So now, after starting the season hot and being the last remaining undefeated team in the NFL, now the Chiefs have lost 3 of their last 4 games. So, David, do you think the heat from Alex Smith's sort of hot start to the season has sort of cooled off and the Chiefs are coming back to earth?
I definitely believe that is part of it. I mean, Alex Smith started off this year astronomically good. He's been having a career year, but I think we're starting to see him recede a little bit. One of those touchdowns that he threw should not have happened, with Tyreek Hill pulling some Madden moves and slipping through all the defenders on his way to a touchdown. But I think as well, they've just been playing really good opponents. I mean, last week they played Oakland, who had what seemed to be infinite chances to get a last-minute touchdown, And this week they played Dallas, who still has Ezekiel Elliott. So, I think they've hit a rough patch, but I'm sure in the end they'll come out on top still.
Yeah, by virtue of a lot of teams in the AFC sort of struggling, the Broncos have really sort of hit a wall and haven't been performing well. You look at teams, we talked about the AFC East being really out in the open and not really having a lot of quality teams there. The Buffalo Bills, I believe, are sitting in playoff contention now after their hot start to the season. So really, this year in the NFL is certainly a weird one. We'll be back next week to recap all the stories from Week 10, but stick around for more SportsZone after this.
And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our NBA segment, Throwing It Up. I'm here with Daniel. So, Daniel, we'll start off by talking about the Celtics. After that Gordon Hayward injury, everybody sort of wrote them off, said, well, they're not going to do too well in the Eastern Conference, but they're actually in the first place in the Eastern Conference right now. So, what do you think is going on with the Celtics?
So they've been playing phenomenally defensively. This is a team that's been shutting down their opponents, and not only this, but we've been seeing pretty good contributions from some of their young players. We've seen Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum stepping up in the absence of Gordon Hayward. We've seen Horford playing well. We've seen Kyrie Irving having some solid games, some not so solid games too. And we've seen the bench playing pretty well, Smart playing some good defense too.
And on the opposite side of the Eastern Conference, you got the Celtics in first place, but then you got the Cleveland Cavaliers, who coming into the season were sort of the favorites in the Eastern Conference, bringing in players like Dwayne Wade. They're sort of struggling a bit, and Dwayne Wade sort of calling out the starters, saying they need to do more. So do you think Dwayne Wade was right in his comments? Do you think he was wrong? What do you think's going on in Cleveland?
I think Dwayne Wade made a mistake by calling out his starters publicly. I think that's unacceptable. Honestly, I think he's got to keep that within the locker room. I mean, there was a similar issue where Wade had some issue with some of his Bulls teammates last year where he was calling out the young players. I think this just creates tension in the locker room that the team doesn't need, as they're standing 4-6 right now. This shows that they need Isaiah Thomas to come back as their second leading scorer, a similar role that Kyrie Irving had last year. And also, the team is very dependent on LeBron. They were hoping this year with a stronger bench that he would get less minutes, but because the team has been playing so poorly and players like Dwayne Wade and J.R. Smith have been underperforming, incredibly underperforming. I mean, they've been really struggling. LeBron James has had an insane burden. He actually scored 57 points on Friday night's game against the Wizards, and they still barely pulled off the victory. This is looking a lot like the 2014 Heat team that basically was carried by LeBron.
Yeah, and you talk about that 57-point performance against the Wizards, the Cavs really struggling a little bit, and LeBron really picked it up that game, so that was good, but definitely still a lot of problems in Cleveland. But a team that's really been surprising so far is the New York Knicks. They started off the year 0-3, but then Kristaps Porzingis has been playing out of his mind, averaging 30 points per game. He's an MVP candidate right now. So what do you think has caused the Knicks to sort of turn around their season so early?
I think Porzingis is much more comfortable with the offense now that Melo is gone. I think he basically has the keys to the offense. He's been getting much more involved, and the Knicks have been winning more games as a result. And they definitely have a chance to make the playoffs. I don't quite see Porzingis winning MVP this year. I think it's a bit early, but I definitely see him being an All-NBA first team type of player, maybe All-NBA second team. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely Porzingis playing well. Another big addition for the Knicks was drafting Frank Ntilikina, the Frenchman, 8th overall pick, who's been playing well the past couple games. But moving on to the Western Conference, you look, right now the Houston Rockets are sort of top. James Harden playing really well. Also, you got to remember that Chris Paul is out right now. He's going to be out for about a month. So are the Rockets just better without Chris Paul on the floor, or do you think that once Chris Paul comes back, they'll continue to succeed?
I think they'll continue to succeed with Chris Paul on the floor because even if Harden is the primary ball handler, I still think Chris Paul could spread the floor. He's a phenomenal three-point shooter. He could also be a secondary scorer, maybe tertiary scorer, because Eric Gordon is also a great scorer. But I think James Harden is determined to win MVP this year. He finished second in MVP voting 2 of the past 3 years, and it really looks like not only does he really want to help his team get a top seed, but he also wants to win MVP and prove the league what he's all about with that 56-point performance this weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned James Harden, obviously, who had an unbelievable year last year and is continuing on this year. Maybe another MVP candidate in James Harden. But the team in the Western Conference sort of struggling is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously, this offseason they added Paul George, they added Carmelo Anthony, but it's not really clicking, especially on the offensive end for them. You know, it looks like Russell Westbrook's a little bit deferring too much. So, what do you think is going on in Oklahoma City, and how can they improve their performance?
I think Russell Westbrook should be a little bit more aggressive, similar to how he was last year. Maybe not quite as aggressive as last year, but definitely more aggressive than how he has been this year. I'm not pushing the panic button quite yet with OKC. They've lost some really close games. They lost to the Trailblazers in a really close game where Carmelo got ejected in a blasphemous play. It shouldn't have been an ejection. And they also lost to the Timberwolves on a buzzer beater. So I think the team is still a threat in the Western Conference. And that with Paul George, Carmelo, and Russell Westbrook, they have three guys who could obviously help the team win a championship potentially.
Yeah, and something definitely needs to change in Oklahoma City. Obviously, they've put all their chips on the table, you know, getting those three superstars. So we'll have to wait to see what happens with that. But that's all we have right now for Throwing It Up. And stick around for more SportsZone after this.
Hello and welcome back to SportsZone. This is the college football segment. I'm once again joined by Daniel this week, and the first week of the college football playoff rankings brought a lot of drama on the playing field over the weekend, but I think we'll start with the rankings themselves. This past Tuesday, the playoff selection committee made their initial rankings with Georgia as the number 1 team, Alabama as the number 2 team, Notre Dame with 1 loss sitting as the number 3 team, and Clemson jumping up and taking the number 4 spot with undefeated teams Miami and Wisconsin dropping significantly. Daniel, you know, not a lot. It's a stretch to bring a lot or draw a lot of conclusions from the opening or initial college football rankings, but do you think this sort of is indicative of what the committee thinks of undefeated teams like Wisconsin and Miami?
Absolutely. I think the committee really looks into strength of schedule when it comes to making these rankings. You see a 1-loss Notre Dame team, as well as many other 1-loss teams ranked above undefeated Wisconsin and Miami. Wisconsin has not played a very hard schedule thus far, which is why they aren't ranked very high despite being undefeated. And Miami had been staggering through some pretty weak opponents. They barely beat Georgia Tech, barely beat FSU, who's played with their backup quarterback the whole year, and they barely beat a very bad North Carolina team. So it goes to show you that they care about eye test, and they care a lot about strength of schedule, and not as much about your record as people might think.
Yeah, and the selection committee may have a lot more headaches this week after a wild weekend in college football. I think we'll start in the Big Ten. Ohio State and Penn State, respectively, both coming off of that big game last weekend where Ohio State's victory sort of put them in the driver's seat in terms of the Big Ten and the playoff picture overall. Ohio State was trounced by Iowa, I think losing by over 30 points there, and Penn State also losing on a last-second field goal to Michigan State. So now the Big Ten's quote-unquote 2 best teams are now sitting with 2 losses. Wisconsin, as you mentioned, Daniel, is sitting undefeated. Wisconsin likely will play one of these 2-loss or maybe more teams in the Big Ten championship. And Daniel, do you think, as it stands now, the Big Ten is in a position to get a team in the college football playoff?
I still think they are. I think if Wisconsin runs the table, they have a chance to make the playoffs. Because despite Ohio State and Penn State potentially having 2 losses, or Michigan State 2 losses, and making the playoff and making the championship game, I think that would be a quality win to boost Wisconsin's resume. The only problem is for Wisconsin is how some of the other 1-loss teams currently ranked above them will do, because those 1-loss teams have a much stronger schedule and are likely to be favored to make the playoffs just for that reason.
Yeah, and another undefeated team who sort of helped their case this past weekend was the University of Miami, defeating 13th ranked Virginia Tech, sort of a marquee win to put on their resume. You talked about them stumbling past some teams that maybe they should have been beating a little more handily, but a victory over the number 13 team in the land sort of gives them a little legitimacy as an undefeated team, and also gives big weight coming up to their matchup this week against number 3 Notre Dame. So Daniel, do you think Miami is in a position where they can play themselves from where they weren't getting a lot of respect as the number 10 team into this top 4 conversation?
Absolutely. I think with a big win against Virginia Tech, a team that is a very good team, and they pulled out a victory against them, I think now they've earned the respect from the committee, and with tomorrow's rankings, they'll prove that. And with this game against Notre Dame, you could see Miami jumping into the top 4 if they win this game. Unfortunately, for both teams, I believe that if they lose the game, it would basically eliminate them from contention of making the playoffs, especially Notre Dame. Notre Dame already has 1 loss, and they cannot afford another loss on their resume.
Yeah, and what team that'll be keeping a close eye on that might be the Oklahoma Sooners, who picked up a big victory over rivals Oklahoma State in a high-scoring shootout-type game where Baker Mayfield put up video game-like numbers, scoring over 60 points over the number 11 team in the nation. And Oklahoma's sort of been a peripheral figure on this college football playoff. In the initial rankings, they came in as the number 5 team, showing that maybe this committee is giving them a little bit more respect than some of the coaches in the AP poll were. Daniel, do you think with teams losing like Penn State, like Ohio State, knowing that one of Notre Dame and Miami will lose, do you think Oklahoma sort of stands to benefit from this, and with a big game this week against TCU stands to gain a lot from sort of other teams suffering?
Absolutely. I think Oklahoma's strength of schedule is definitely going to help their chances of making the playoffs. You have a team that went on the road and played Ohio State and JT Barrett and pounded them. You have a team that went on the road again against Oklahoma State this past weekend and beat them. And now you have another opportunity at playing a very good TCU team that only has 1 loss. And if they win this game, it would definitely boost their chances of winning the Big 12 and making the playoffs. I believe that this is a very good team that definitely has a chance of finishing in the top 4 when the season's done.
Yeah, very interesting. So that was sort of our thoughts on the college football weekend. We'll see what the selection committee, if they agreed with us when their rankings come out on Tuesday night of this week. But we'll be back next week to recap some of the big games, TCU, Oklahoma, Miami, Notre Dame. But that's all we have now for the college football segment. But stick around for more SportsZone after this.
And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our favorite segment, Thumbles, where we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly in the world of sports and the world at large. So I'll start it off in honor of Ryan. He's not here, so I'll throw a thumbs down to Jake Elmsley. I've never met you, but I hear you suck, so I'll throw a thumbs down to that. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, thumbs down to MLS action this weekend. The New York Red Bulls, my favorite team, we lost to Toronto FC in the 2-legged playoff. Thumbs down to Josie Altidore because he got one of our best players, Sasha Kleshin, red carded. You know, they had a fight in the tunnel. Josie was sort of petulant the entire game. He was getting in our players' faces, and at halftime he got one of our best players red carded. You know, it would have been nice to see that passion from him when he put on the U.S. kit and when he played for the U.S. team versus Trinidad and Tobago, but I guess we didn't see that. So big thumbs down to Josie Altidore. Another thumbs down to Manchester United, who sort of Jose Mourinho put out a very defensive lineup versus Chelsea. I understand it. I understand you're going up against a big team. You're going away from home, and you want to put out a defensive lineup. But you know, Chelsea have been struggling this season. There was really no reason to put out that sort of lineup. You could have gone attacking, and then when they went down 1-0, it sort of threw them all in disarray. So thumbs down to Man United, but there's still a lot of season left, so I'm still hopeful. And I'll throw a thumbs up to the New York Knicks, who started off the year 0-3, and everybody was sort of counting them out. But then Kristaps Porzingis, the unicorn, he's playing unbelievably right now. He's one of the best players in the league, and you can definitely see he's more comfortable with the offense when he gets the ball. You know, his first 2 years he was sort of always pressing when he got the ball. This year he's being more patient. He's got a lot of more new post moves, and he's using his size better. So big thumbs up to the New York Knicks. Thumbs up to Kristaps Porzingis. You know, he's playing with grit. He's playing the New York way. So there's nothing more you can ask from him. And yeah, that's all I got. I'll throw it over to Jessica.
Okay. So, thumbs up to the Seattle Sounders for advancing to the Western Conference Final. Thumbs down to the Seattle Seahawks for losing against the Redskins. I'll give a thumbs up to the University of Washington. The Huskies came back in the AP poll, which was pretty cool. I'll do thumbs down to Real Madrid for losing against Tottenham. And yeah, that's all my thumbs. Here's Kristen.
All right, I'm going to give a thumbs up to Aaron for hosting 2 segments today. He did a great job. Even though he doesn't read my posts in the Facebook group, he did a really good job today, so thumbs up to Aaron. Thumbs up to David for being on the football segment for the first time today. You did a really good job. Thumbs up to Cody for getting picked to be the commencement speaker for the graduating class this fall. We're all really proud of you. I know you're going to do a great job, so we're excited about that. I'll give a thumbs up to the Knicks. They've been playing really well. It's been a lot of fun to watch them. And then I'll give a thumbs down to the Dodgers for losing the World Series because I was really rooting for them. And that's all I have today. Here's Daniel.
I'm going to give a thumbs up to the Jaguars for being 5-3. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a franchise that's really been struggling for many years, and it's good to see them finally turn it around. I'm going to give a thumbs down to the Dallas Mavericks, who are currently the worst team in the NBA, and it looks like they may actually tank this season, and it's unfortunate considering it's probably going to be Dirk Nowitzki's last year, and we won't be able to see him in the playoffs. I'm going to give a thumbs up to the Washington Redskins for pulling off a tough victory on the road in Seattle. That's a very tough place to play. I'm also going to give up a thumbs up to the Houston Astros. This is a franchise that's never won the World Series. Houston notoriously is known for coming up short in the playoffs. They haven't had that much success in all sports, except for the Rockets with the back-to-back titles about 20 years ago. And yeah, that's all.
So I want to give a thumbs up to the Houston Astros again for winning their first championship in 50, 60 years of existence, all going back to the 45s. Want to give a thumbs down to the Wizards for tweeting SUP East Conference and then proceeding to go 1-4 since tweeting that. Maybe 2-4 now, I don't know. I want to give a thumbs up to the Jaguars for carrying the corpse of Blake Bortles throughout the season so far. I want to give a thumbs up to everyone here for letting me do the football segment, and thumbs up to our editors for editing me for that segment. And on a more personal note, I want to give a thumbs up to my grandma for fighting cancer for the 3rd time. Love you, Grandma, and we got you.
Oh, that was tricky. Hey, I'm back. Yeah, I still don't have anything for sports. One day, I promise, but not today. Yeah. So, thumbs up to me. I'm so conceited. Yeah, I'm commencement speaker. How about that? I know I say don't like attention. I freaking love it. Thumbs down because I have an exam this week. That's gonna suck. Thumbs down because it's getting colder. I love sweater weather, but I don't like heavy jacket weather. So that sucks. Oh, thumbs up to all my friends, family, and especially this cast for having my back through the stress of commencements. My love goes out to the cast and crew of ATV SportsZone. You guys are always the best by my side. When you guys just are always there for me. So thank you, SportsZone. You always have a place in my heart. I wish I could give you guys a shout out during commencement, but I can't because they read my script. But yeah, that's all my thumbs. So Vince.
Thank you for that introduction, Cody. I will give a thumbs up to him being announced. Cody, SportsZone's Cody being announced, the commencement speaker. We're all incredibly proud of Cody, and I think that we're very proud. To the sports-related thumbs, we'll give a thumbs up to the Steelers. They gritted out a tough one against the bye week. It was push and pull for a little bit, but Martavis Bryant came up with the performance that was needed of him against the bye week. But all jokes aside, thumbs up, because we didn't have to hear about Martavis Bryant, responding to Instagram comments or not showing up to practice, to this, that, or the other. It was a nice quiet week on the Steelers front, which is always good, because the less drama there is, the better. We'll throw thumbs down to Arsenal against Manchester City this weekend. I've cooled off a little bit. I was a lot madder on Sunday. Now we're a day removed from the match, but just the officials in that game were pitiful. Arsenal, not typical of them, put in a decent performance against a top 6 club away from home, and they were very much in the game after Alexander Lacazette smashed in a goal to bring them within 2-1. But then the officials just decided that they weren't going to do their job. Offside goal, clearly offside goal. I could have called it. My grandma, who can't see, could have seen it. He was offside. David Silva was offside by a mile. It was embarrassing. They score a goal that kills the game. The penalty decision was also scandalous, and Raheem Sterling just diving, flopping all over the pitch, doing what he does best. He's a world-class diver, and that's about it. City, they weren't as good as advertised, in my opinion. They're good, but they're definitely beatable. Hopefully somebody can surpass them and take the Premier League title, because I really don't think I can stand seeing Pep Guardiola gloat about how great he is and he's the second coming and this, that, and the other. Pep Guardiola, you're the worst. Don't ever forget that. We'll go, and I guess a double thumbs down, because Arsenal was really uninspiring. Their second unit against Red Star Belgrade in the Europa League. Theo Walcott putting in a shocking performance. Francis Coquelin was also not his best either. So that was disappointing. But I'll throw a thumbs down to the Big Ten in football. They had the world at their fingertips after the game of the year between Penn State and Ohio State, and then both the teams just decided they weren't going to show up this past weekend, and so now the Big Ten is kind of screwed in terms of the college football playoff. I'll throw a thumbs down to the AU women's field hockey team. They lost in the semifinals of the Patriot League tournament. We had been talking about on AU Insiders for a long time about how it would be a matchup between them and BU in the final, but they stumbled at the first hurdle and couldn't even make it to the final, losing on penalty strokes, which is sort of disappointing. So now the volleyball team is carrying the flag for all of our fall sports as the only team still alive. So hopefully good things come of that. In terms of sports-related thumbs, I think that is all for me. So thank you to everyone here at SportsZone, for commencement speaker Cody Cohen, Daniel, Jessica, Aaron. Aviva was here hosting baseball earlier, Kristen, David. Oh, I will throw one more thumbs down, because Aaron did step in to host throwing it up, but there's only one jump shot like Bobby Knight throwing it up. The form is there, needs some work. We'll work on it for next week. But until then, thank you for everyone for watching SportsZone.
Telling you, like,
It's not you, Dad.
I don't know how to host. All right, no, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Okay. All right.
Are you ready?
Give me a minute. And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our NBA segment, Throwing It Up.
I talked about George
Justin
Springer, MVP.
Justin.
Are you starting here and then going down?
Oh, sure. That's how we normally do it.
That's how we normally do it.
So I'm gonna say start.
Why
We're
are there
gonna
so
go
many
down.
monitors? Do we
I'm
hear that?
gonna say we're gonna go down the line.
I'm gonna look at all of them.
With
I'll be
our
like,
World
hello.
Series thoughts, Kristen. You start. I'm gonna say we're gonna go down the line. Good job, Cody.
Wait, can you ask them if we're
One
looking at the
second.
correct
Yeah,
camera?
are we looking at the
looking at camera 2?
Which one's camera 2?
We're looking at the right camera. That one.
You
The correct camera.
I need.
Here?
Yes. Yes.
I just want to be in bloopers, all right?
start.
Ryan cheated me out of bloopers last week.
No, you
I
weren't
was,
in them.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't at all?
No.
What were you?
Because I was dancing when
You
he
were
was playing-
definitely. Oh no, you know why we can't? Because there was music playing. I put it in.
Copyright.
Copyright.
God damn.
I put it
Copyright
in,
restriction.
But Vince kindly reminded me that we cannot do that because.
All right, thanks, Vince. You're my home dog, even though you don't know who I am really.
What did he say?
Vince, you're amazing.
What did he say?
Don't touch the mic, Manenberg. That's what
No,
Cody
okay.
says.
Sorry, Cody.
All right. Does someone else want to open thumbs or?
I'll do it.
Yes.
I'll do it.
Yes. Yes.
All right. I'm
I'm
stepping
so
up
pumped.
today, guys.
Yes, Aaron's stepping up today. Are we all have to come in on this side, so.
Oh, you're okay. Do you want to use this mic or?
Vince,
Yep.
is this mic good?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
And then,
This one's like. It's kind of like
okay.
we get wrapped around the other.
All right, what are
In a frat party.
okay. We're not discussing this because it's probably recording.
It's going on bloopers
Can we
probably.
Ryan Siegel proud?
Yes, make Ryan proud.
Wait, who's gonna thumbs down? Jake
Oh,
Emsley.
Someone has to do it in his honor. I feel like it can't be me.
Vince.
I'll do it because I've never.
Yeah.
Just Aaron, you have to say
Thumbs down, Jake Emsley. I've never.
because he
met him,
sucks.
But he sucks.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Dude, I don't.